Hi everybody, welcome to a brand new video series called Learning Japanese. First off, we're going to start with an introduction as to why I'm making this video series. I'm an undergraduate student who's been studying Japanese for 2 years now, and in this coming fall semester, I will be moving on from the intermediate level to the advanced level. At one point in my life, I thought that learning a new language was one of the least things that I wanted to pursue, not just like official academia wise, but just do at all, because comparatively speaking, I wouldn't want to learn something that is just doing something I already know how to do in a different way without offering me any new insight to anything, as opposed to learning something in the physical science area or even other such humanities classes. But it's needless to say that that opinion was completely revoked, because there is something really enriching about learning a second language, and I'm even inclined to say that if you do know more than one language and you learned both of them when you were a child, it's actually worth it to start picking up a third one or a new one, whatever your count is. Because I can speak from experience, even though I know more than 2 languages, and more than one of those has been a gradual learning from childhood, I didn't quite have the awareness that I do now to appreciate really what it's made out of. So, that's my words of encouragement to maybe pick up this language or just continue learning it, or maybe that'll apply to some other language, and that's just fine. That being said, as much as you can learn from these videos, I do champion completely that viewers individually take the chance to answer things by themselves and to question just about everything, and to truly believe that there is, of course, more than one way to say one given thing. So yeah, as of now, I do intend for this video series to be very much long-lasting and consistent for the most part. Of course, this will be the lesson number 1, but I am seeing this series going as far into the hundreds count. I do want to eventually take these videos and make the content centered around culture and other aspects of the country instead of just language, but we will see how it goes from here. So because I am taking the jump from the intermediate level to the advanced level, which relative to actual Japanese education isn't that too big of a deal, but for me it is, I am going to be reviewing what I've learned in the past 2 years, starting from the pretty much bare minimums, which is basically the alphabet and how to write every single character. So before we actually get into the conversational content, we're gonna have to cover the need-to-know basics of the language. So Japanese uses 4 sets of characters. The first, or there actually isn't a particular order, but we're just gonna do a non-particular order. The first one is hiragana, and the sound structure of the Japanese language is actually relatively simple. There are 5 vowel sounds, 14 simple consonant sounds, and 12 complex consonant sounds. So I've moved to the side of the frame just so that in post-processing I can add a chart of the Hiragana Syllabary. So here it is. And we are actually, or I am actually, and maybe you can do it along with me, I'm actually going to pronounce each one right about now. So to start off with, we have the 5 regular vowels, which are a, I, U, E, and O. Then we go down the list of consonants and we pronounce them with complementary to the respective vowels. So for the K series, we will do ka, ki, ku, ke, and ko. For the S series, we'll do sa. Then for the E in the S series, it's actually transformed to she instead of si. So basically the order is sa, shi, su, se, and so. The T series also has a similar inordinary aspect for the E vowel, and it is chi instead of ti. So the whole row is going to be read as ta, chi, su, te, and to. For the N series, that one's more regular. It's na, ni, nu, ne, and no. For the H series, there's another discrepancy, but in a different vowel. It's going to be for the U vowel, and instead of hu, it's going to be automatically changed to fu. So the H series goes as following: ha, he, fu, he, and ho. For the N series, that's practically normal all throughout, so it's going to be ma, mi, mu, me, and mo. And when we get to the Y series, which is sometimes considered a vowel in the English language, but not here, we actually only use the Y with 3 of the vowels, which are A, U, and O. So that one consists of Ya, U, and Yo, and that's it. The R series itself is normal, so it's just going to be Ra, Ri, Ru, Re, and Ro. And then when we get to the W series, it's actually lesser than the Y in that it only uses W with the A and the O vowels. So the whole row is just going to be Wa and O. Notice that the pronunciation with the O vowel actually doesn't use the sound of the W character at all. It's simply O and not Wo. And now we get to the rather strange consonants, and those are G, Z, D, P, and B. In the English language, these letters have their own individual pronunciation and appearance, but in the Japanese language, these consonants actually take some influence from some of the consonants that we mentioned earlier. And what that influence actually is called in Japanese is the dakuten. What this literally means is the voicing mark, and what it's supposed to tell you is to use a phonetic shift when you're pronouncing that consonant. So here we have the G, which looks almost exactly identical to the K letter, but you'll notice that the dakuten, which looks like the English quotation marks, I guess, and that's what's supposed to tell you to change the pronunciation from, say, ki to gi or ka to ga. So when we read out the row for the G consonant, it sounds like this: ga, gi, gu, ge, and go. And with the others, we have basically the same pattern. The Z letter is identical or nearly identical to the S, and it also has the same shift with the S letter when you pronounce it with the E vowel. So what you would think to be Z actually translates to G. So the whole row would be read like this: Za, Ji, Zu, Ze, and Zo. And for the D consonant, we have essentially the same thing as the T consonant, in which there are shifts in the E vowel and the U vowel. So it's pronounced accordingly, the whole series. Da, Ji, Zu, De, and Do. Of course, note how the G sound is pronounced exactly the same as you would with the Z and the E vowel. And of course, how the pronunciation with the U vowel is Zu instead of Du. For the B consonant, its influence comes from the H consonant, so the whole row is pronounced accordingly. Ba, Bi, Bu, Be, and Bo. And last but not least for this grouping, we have the P consonant, which is actually unique in itself because instead of using the dokuten, which looks like a quotation marks in English, it's actually using the handakuten, which is also called the maru, which literally means circle, and that's exactly what it looks like. It looks like a small circle that would go in the place of the what we were just familiar with, the quotation marks instead. But the pronunciation is basically the same. It takes its influence from the H consonant as well, and the whole row is pronounced like this: Pa, Pi, Pu, Pe, and Po. And now we move on to hiragana with the complex consonants. So basically what these complex consonants are using the A, U, and O vowels, but in conjunction with the consonant Y as well. So these 3 new modified sounds, which are Ya, Yo, and U, we're going to take those and use them with other consonants like the K or the S consonant to make a whole new sound again. And while we do use this on most of the consonants in the syllabary, we do not use them on all of them. For instance, the W letter is void of this effect. And when we're using these complex consonants, the first letter that we use isn't the typical standalone K or the standalone S. It's actually going to be those consonants with the vowel E. So it's going to be the ki, the shi, the chi, the ni, and etc. So in the same order as the last chart, we're going to start with K. So the 3 pronunciations for the consonant K is kya, kyu, and kyo. Next is the consonant S, which is actually unique because you don't enunciate the sound of the letter Y at all. Instead of sho, you do sho. So the 3 complex consonants for the S consonant are sha, shu, and sho. For the T consonant, we also have a unique pronunciation because instead of using the t sound, we use the ch sound. So it's going to be cha, chu, and cho. For the N consonant, the pronunciation is more simple in that it's just nya, nyu, and yo. For the H series, we have hya, hyu, and hyo. For the M series, we have mya, mu, and myo. For the R series, we have rya, ryu, ryo. For the G series, we have gya, gyu, and gyo. For the Z series, which is going to be using the Z consonant with the E vowel. So it's going to be pronounced with the G sound instead. We have ja, ju, and jo. For the D series, we have the same pronunciation as the Z series because remember earlier we said with the D consonant and the E vowel, we get the same thing as the Z consonant with the E vowel, which is G. And so we have again ja, ju, and jo. And lastly, for the B series, we have bia, bu, and bio. The last note I want to mention for the complex consonant sounds are that actually about 80% of what we just covered isn't used very much at all. In fact, pretty much the only two series that I see used in everyday or casual or even formal conversation or writing even are the K series and the S series. So it's just kya, kyu, kyo, sha, shu, sho, and that's mostly the bulk of what you see when it comes to complex consonants. But of course, it's you never know when they might appear, so it's best to just know it all. And now we have to have the essential mention about the consonant N, because the N consonant is very special in the Japanese language because it is considered a Moraic. The consonant N is considered a Moraic consonant. In Japanese, all of the consonants always appear with a vowel. If you hadn't noticed earlier, we were pronouncing all of the letters with a vowel. Ka, ke, ki, mu, mo. None of them appear alone, just the letter K, that is just not gonna happen. But that's where the uniqueness of the consonant N comes in, because it is the one thing that can stand alone, just a simple N. And it's actually a very common instance. So basically what you just need to know for now is that it does appear. It's the only letter that does that, and the way that you pronounce it is just pretty similar to the English in that it's just n. So some example words that it appears in is actually, say, Nihongo, which is Japanese in Japanese. Notice that we have the letter ni, we have the letter ho, and then before the last syllable go, we have just n. So it's pronounced n, so Nihongo. Another word in which it appears like that is hon, which is the Japanese word for book. So it's just the letter ho and the letter n. So hon. Next, we're going to cover something called vowel devoicing, and this is primarily used for the vowels E and the vowels U, which are in English I and U. So basically what vowel devoicing means is when you're in a conversation and you say the letter, you actually shape your mouth as if you are pronouncing it, but you actually don't pronounce it at all. So for the U and the E vowel, this applies when either of them are at the end of the sentence or they are between two voiceless consonants. It's actually a pretty common occurrence, but it's pretty subtle, so it's hard to notice. And it actually appears in one of the most everyday terms that people use with each other. In the term ohayo gozaimasu, which is good morning in Japanese, we have the u vowel appearing at the end of the second word, gozaimasu. And even though it is at the end, we don't pronounce it gozaimasu. We actually pronounce it gozaimasu. So although this is a pretty standard thing that Japanese speakers are somewhat encouraged to filter naturally, don't be overwhelmed if you can't handle it from the start. It's a thing that for the most part takes a getting used to, which is why I guess they consider it natural, because it just comes to you naturally eventually, and you can't really help it if you weren't born speaking the language. In Japanese, short and long vowels are considered contrastive, and what that means is the longer that you pronounce them for, or emphasize them, or extend them, it changes the meaning of the word that they're a part of. In English, this isn't really the case at all. We've actually developed a kind of art form of speaking by using emphasized vowel sounds. For example, you could say something along the lines of, I've been waiting for so long, man. And the emphasis of the O in the word slow directly goes on to emphasize the definition of slow, therefore calling that person very, very, very slow. And while that same nuance happens in Japanese at some times, in the Japanese language there are of course official established meanings behind those kind of enunciation. And for our examples, we're just going to use the most common occurrence of those of all. In Japanese, when you say the word oba-san with the a vowel inside the word completely unemphasized, you're saying aunt or middle-aged woman. In contrast, when you emphasize the a in that word and say oba-san, what you're really saying is grandmother or elderly woman. Similarly, when you say oji-san, you're saying uncle or middle-aged man. But when you emphasize the E in that word to oji-san, you're basically saying grandfather or elderly man. And that's pretty much the basics of what you need to know about long vowels. We might bump into them later on and we'll have some further clarification or specification about their appearances, meanings, context, whatever. But for now, we're gonna move on to other introductory things. So next, instead of long vowels, we're gonna talk about long consonants. Long consonants actually appear very frequently in Japanese language, writing, and conversation. So the way that you recognize a long consonant is when there's a symbol that looks like a really smaller version of the letter su, and this symbol is informally called the chisai su, or literally translated to small su. It can also be called more formally as a sokuon, and this symbol precedes the consonant that it's going to modify. So the example we're going to use for this is the word kekka, which means result. And in this word, the long consonant, if you hadn't noticed, is the K in the middle. And if we were to write this word out in Japanese, the sokuon or the chisai su would appear before the K. If we were to write that in the English alphabet, the K, instead of featuring that symbol, would just appear twice. And basically, all you really need to know is that when you pronounce that particular consonant, you stress out its enunciation, which is why it's aptly named a long consonant. Last, and maybe just least, we're gonna talk about the pitch accent in Japanese. And as a little aside, the pitch accent is probably the least important aspect of the Japanese language, and to be honest, I don't even have a complete grasp of it, or even an intermediate grasp of it, really. But we're gonna mention it just to be safe, and so that people know that it exists, and they have an awareness that when they bump into some trouble in conversational Japanese, this might be the cause of it, or whatever, clearing misunderstandings and whatnot. So basically what pitch pattern is when Japanese words are basically interpreted differently when they have different pitch patterns, as in maybe you're pronouncing it from a very high pitch to a low pitch, or vice versa. And perhaps the most well-known example of this is the word hashi, which can mean both chopsticks and bridge. This isn't affected by how the word is spelled at all, but rather how you pronounce it in conversation. When you're pronouncing hashi in the sense that you want it to mean chopsticks, you go from a high to low pitch pattern, so basically it might sound something like hashi. In contrast, when you say the word hashi and you intend to mean bridge, you might sound more like hashi, because it goes from a low pitch accent to a high pitch accent. And that's essentially all we're going to cover about pitch accent, and that's also going to be the last topic covered in this video. So as some final words of instruction, even though we might have breezed past the whole hiragana chart and its long list of letters, I actually have no indication of telling. I'll get an idea of how long it was once I start editing the pieces of the video together. But yeah, even though this might have been a very quick introduction to the language, those characters are essential. My personal experience, it was the first week of my Japanese class that we had to learn the whole character set, including the next one that we're going to cover, katakana, in less than a week, because we had a vocab quiz the second week of class. And basically the truth is you can't move on to the next lessons in this video series, or if you're using some other course of instruction, you can't move on to the grammar and the vocabulary and whatnot until you have the letters, their pronunciations, and their writing styles down. It's kind of hard because the easiest way to learn them is to just keep on writing them down yourself over and over again. And that's, I don't know, I guess you can associate that learning tactic with something back in grade school when you're learning the alphabet, or just vocabulary in that sense. And it might be hard to go back down to those methods when you're such an established learner at this point, but it is what you gotta do, and it's a very good way to set yourself up for when we start going into the language's third character set, which is kanji, the Chinese characters that are gonna be just a hellhole of rehashed writing and whatnot. I've decided to stop filming content for lesson 1 here, even though we are basically lacking in a lot of other introductory information, such as the katakana character set, the kanji introduction, and other tidbits of maybe introductory phrases or basic phrases in Japanese, like greetings and whatnot like that. We are going to continue on into lesson 2, and the introductory material might just last into the double digits of this video series, and that might be a good thing or a bad thing, because we'll have extensive information, or depending on the viewer, things might be lacking, uninteresting, whatever. But we're going to continue on, and thanks for watching, and stay tuned for lesson 2.